For months, astronomers gave us their assurance. 𝗺𝗏 would be nothing more than a magnificent flyby. It was supposed to be a harmless interstellar visitor, skimming past Mars before vanishing back into the black. But the cosmos rarely offers harmlessness without a reason. And now, James Webb, our most sophisticated eye in the void, has delivered data that completely overturns the narrative. The numbers have mutated. The trajectory has deviated. And for the first time, scientists are whispering the reality no one wanted to admit. 𝗺𝗏 might strike Mars. Yet, this isn't simply about a comet. This is about calculated maneuvers, clockwork gas pulses, and an object behaving less like a rock and more like a machine. The deeper you look into the data, the clearer the truth becomes. 𝗺𝗏 is not drifting. It is steering, adjusting, targeting, and the red planet is directly in its crosshairs. Whatever this entity is, it isn't finished with our solar system. Let's dive in. When 𝗺𝗏 was first identified on July 1st, it appeared to be just another interstellar interloper. It was a fast-moving blur with a glowing coma, traveling at velocities never before recorded for an inbound object, nearly 87 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. At that pace, it covers the distance between Earth and the Moon in under 80 minutes. However, what stunned scientists wasn't its velocity, it was its behavior. Typically, comets slow down, fragment, or stabilize as they near the inner system. 𝗺𝗏, however, began to accelerate, subtly yet consistently. Even more disturbing, its trajectory began to tighten. Slight course corrections became visible, and the object's coma, its surrounding halo of dust and gas, doubled in brightness in a matter of weeks. Spectral analysis unveiled intense spikes in CO2 outgassing and ultraviolet energy at rates never seen in any comet. It was acting less like a drifting chunk of frozen ice and more like a guided missile. That is when Webb's deep field sensors captured something that changed everything: rhythmic pulses emanating from the tail. These weren't chaotic jets caused by sunlight melting ice. They were deliberate thrusts occurring in perfect 17-minute intervals. A pattern, a signal, a maneuver. Getty images. As Webb, Gemini South, and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory continued to track the object, the numbers began to tell a terrifying story. What was once a near miss had evolved into something far more perilous. A revised impact distance of merely 1.95 million kilometers from Mars, a hair's breadth on the cosmic scale. Worse yet, simulations demonstrated that even 10 kilometers per second of added velocity, a fraction of what is already being measured in those gas pulses, could be sufficient to shift its path into a direct collision. Consider that. Just a nudge, a whisper of thrust, and Mars becomes ground zero. This level of control is unprecedented in natural bodies. It is as if 𝗺𝗏 is utilizing its own outgassing as microthrusters, adjusting its approach exactly as a spacecraft would. Even more disturbing, those thrusts are perfectly aligned with the planet's orbital plane. Scientists aren't just tracking an object anymore. They're watching it take aim, and the window for impact keeps shrinking. Between September 19th and 30th, any single outburst could be the one that pushes it over the edge. It is no longer just amateur theorists or sci-fi enthusiasts raising the alarm. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb and his team have published a paper proposing a bold hypothesis. 𝗺𝗏 may be an engineered probe. The data supports them. Radar bounces from the Goldstone antennas, and the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter returned metallic echoes, not the soft, watery signatures typical of comets. Inside sources from NASA describe the radar reflections as unlike anything we have ever encountered. Add to that the green, needle-like streams observed in amateur high-exposure images. 3 glowing beams converging toward Mars, pulsing in sync with the exhaust vents, and the picture becomes undeniable. This object is not behaving naturally. Loeb suggests a scenario where 𝗺𝗏 could be deliberately targeting Mars to crash, or worse, to deliver something. Probes, signals, spores, whatever it is, this is no coincidence. Mars is being approached with surgical intent, and humanity is caught watching an operation we barely understand unfolding before our eyes. What happens if it hits? The answer is almost unfathomable. With an estimated mass of 10 billion tons and a speed of 57 kilometers per second relative to Mars, an impact would unleash more than 2 million megatons of energy. That is thousands of times stronger than the most powerful nuclear detonation in Earth's history. The crater would be 60 kilometers wide and 5 kilometers deep, scattering debris across Martian orbit, some of which could be ejected into interplanetary space. And yes, that means some of it could eventually reach Earth. But the consequences extend far beyond rock and dust. Mars is home to dozens of scientific assets, rovers, orbiters, experiments searching for life, and climate records spanning decades. An impact wouldn't just destroy machines. It would erase decades of research, blind communication arrays, and possibly ignite contamination events we are wholly unprepared for. ESA, Roscosmos, CNSA, and JAXA have all initiated planetary defense discussions, not against an alien fleet, but against a single object behaving just a little too much like a vehicle. For years, scientists have speculated that Mars once hosted life and perhaps still harbors it deep beneath its rusty soil. Subsurface lakes, dormant microbes, ancient ecosystems locked beneath the permafrost. This is one of the primary reasons we have sent so many landers, orbiters, and rovers. But if 𝗺𝗵 strikes, all of that becomes a biological unknown. The extreme heat of impact wouldn't just vaporize the surface. It would fracture the deeper layers of the Martian crust, exposing reservoirs we have never reached. And if 𝗺𝗵 carries organic molecules, or worse, synthetic biology embedded in its outgassing trails, the fusion of Earth-independent evolution with Martian biology could result in genetic contamination on a planetary scale. Some biologists refer to this as panspermia in reverse. Not life spreading from Mars to Earth, but life being deliberately seeded into Mars. It raises a terrifying question. What if the goal was never destruction? What if the object is a delivery system and Mars is the incubator? As 𝗺𝗵 approached its closest point to Mars, the James Webb Telescope locked onto the object for one final ultra-deep scan. The result was classified for 48 hours before a fragment was released to the public. However, leaks from within the Webb project tell a much darker story. NIR-SPEC and MIRI instruments detected traces of synthetic polymers, molecules resembling Earth-made plastics and carbon nanotubes intermixed with natural gases. These are not the kinds of structures that form in a vacuum or during cometary heating. These are engineered materials. Webb spectrographs also picked up persistent isotopic anomalies, notably in carbon and hydrogen, matching no known solar system object. In short, 𝗺𝗵 contains things that should not exist in space, and all of it is heading straight toward a planet that might still be alive. Webb's data was shared privately with major space agencies. Emergency task forces were convened, not because we could stop it, but because we were running out of time to figure out what it really is. As panic grew, NASA made a surprising move: silence. The usual press releases ceased. The telemetry feeds from Perseverance and Tian-1 showed gaps. Questions regarding potential impact scenarios were redirected. Something had shifted. Then, in a classified transmission later leaked by an internal whistleblower, a phrase appeared: "Impact protocol initiated." What does that mean? No one knows for sure, but insiders claim a series of encrypted signals were transmitted from Earth-based stations to all functioning Mars equipment. Curious, considering there is no known method to deflect or intercept 𝗺𝗵. Unless, of course, the purpose of those signals wasn't to protect Mars, but to prepare it. If 𝗺𝗵 is an intelligent system, even semi-autonomous, it may be reacting to energy signatures, orbital beacons, or encoded pulses. And if Earth just turned those systems on, we may have just confirmed we are listening. Worse, we may have just confirmed we are responding. And whatever intelligence is behind this object, if any, now knows that we are aware. A team of cryptographers at the SETI Institute did something no one else had considered. They took the current trajectory, velocity, gravitational vectors, and time of closest approach, data points known by every astronomer on Earth, and translated them into binary. Then they applied standard compression algorithms used in deep space messaging. What emerged was more than just random data. It was structured, repeating. It contained a series of numerical intervals corresponding to atomic numbers: 6, 8, 14, 26, carbon, oxygen, silicon, iron, the building blocks of both life and machines. Interspersed were prime number countdowns and spacings consistent with recursive messaging protocols. In short, the entire flight path of 𝗺𝗵 may be a signal in motion, a message delivered not through radio, but through behavior, through timing, through presence. This would mean we aren't simply observing a trajectory toward Mars. We are witnessing a communicative event. The impact window itself is part of the message. If it strikes, that is a sentence. If it misses, that is another. Either way, the answer is already written in the stars. Getty images. As the projected impact path narrowed, planetary scientists noticed a chilling coincidence. 𝗺𝗵's updated trajectory crossed a narrow corridor passing directly above Elysium Planitia, a geologically young region of Mars known for its unusually symmetrical surface features. Satellite imagery revealed concentric ridges, spiral-like flows, and formations that eerily mimic Fibonacci patterns. These weren't new, but what caught everyone's attention was the fact that the exact vector of 𝗺𝗵's descent aligned with the Central Depression, a perfectly circular basin less than 3.5 kilometers wide. No known impact origin, no volcanic residue, but perfectly centered within this basin was a deposit of crystalline silicates with refractive properties found nowhere else on Mars. When hit by solar radiation, they emit brief pulses of infrared light at regular intervals. Most dismissed this as a geological curiosity, but now scientists are asking, was this basin a random feature or a beacon? A rendezvous point? And if so, who set the coordinates? Just as James Webb locked back onto 𝗺𝗵 from its alternate tracking point, an unexpected anomaly was observed. Behind the main body of the object, not physically attached, but trailing at a consistent 0.07 astronomical units, was a secondary shadow. It wasn't a debris field. It wasn't gas. It was something darker. Radar couldn't detect it. Infrared couldn't warm it. But photometric analysis showed a sharp drop in light that moved in perfect unison with 𝗺𝗵, as if tethered by some invisible force. This shadow maintained an exact distance, unperturbed by gravity or acceleration. When visualized in polar coordinates, it formed a perfect orbital trace. Something was following 𝗺𝗵, not escorting, not hurting, but mirroring. The speculation exploded. Was it a secondary object? A drone? A gravitational echo? Or something else entirely? A field, a memory, a protocol? For the first time, researchers began to consider the idea that 𝗺𝗵 might not be the main actor in this cosmic event, but simply the carrier of something more elusive. With all eyes now on the projected impact date, an even more unsettling pattern emerged. When scientists laid out the entire trajectory of 𝗺𝗵 and its closest approaches to the Sun, Earth, and Mars, they found that each alignment fell on astronomical resonance dates, key orbital harmonics long studied by ancient civilizations. September 23rd, October 5th, November 11th. These dates match not just seasonal equinoxes and transits, but rare gravitational synchronizations that occur in cycles of 54 years. In fact, the last time all three inner planets were in similar orbital positions during a comet's passage was the 𝗺𝗵 event in 1908. This synchronicity sent shockwaves through the scientific community. How could a random interstellar object arrive at such astronomically significant moments? Unless it wasn't random, unless it was timing itself, as if following a clock not built by human hands. This wasn't celestial coincidence. It was a pattern, and patterns in space are always the signature of design. One final revelation pushed the conversation into a realm once considered taboo in mainstream science: consciousness in motion. A neurocosmology team at Princeton, studying neural synchronization patterns under deep meditative states, noticed something extraordinary. When subjects were exposed to the pulsation frequencies emitted by 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲's light curve, particularly those 17-minute gas vent intervals, their brain wave activity synchronized. Not just in one subject, but across multiple people in different rooms, isolated and unaware. This isn't just resonance. This is neurological entrainment, as if the signal wasn't only mechanical, but cognitive. And if it can affect us from across millions of kilometers, what does that say about its origin? Is it possible that 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲 is not a rock, not a spacecraft, but a thought moving through the universe like a seed of awareness? A message you don't read, but feel? Something that activates when heard? Something that becomes part of you the moment you understand it? If that is true, then the impact on Mars, whether physical or not, may be just a symptom. The real event may already be happening inside us. As fears surrounding the potential impact escalated, a quiet group of archaeoastronomers began cross-referencing 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲's trajectory with ancient sky maps. Records not just from Western observatories, but from Babylonian, Mayan, and Tibetan cosmology scrolls. What they found defied belief. A pattern known as the flame serpent appeared across cultures, describing a celestial body that descends from the outer dark, curves unnaturally near the sun, and aims for the red god, Mars. The pattern repeated in steel carvings and even cave etchings, each depicting the same sinuous path. But one set stood out. A pre-Incan calendar stone from Tiwanaku showing 4 radiating lines from Mars after the comet's descent. When processed through photogrammetry, the lines matched Webb's projected debris dispersion pattern in the event of a Mars impact. What does this mean? That somehow someone saw this coming, not in this century but thousands of years ago. It suggests that 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲 is not merely passing through history. It might be history repeating itself. And Mars may not be the target. It may be the trigger. Then, something utterly unexpected happened. The ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, quiet for days due to power conservation, detected a spike in xenon isotopes in the upper Martian atmosphere. At first, scientists assumed it was solar radiation, but the composition was all wrong. This wasn't being added from above. It was rising from below. More specifically, from deep fissures near 𝗺𝗶𝘂𝘂𝘁𝗲, one of the most geologically unstable regions on Mars. Seismic activity spiked. Temperature readings rose by 3 degrees Kelvin in the subsurface layers. And in a twist that left the scientific community in stunned silence, magnetometer readings detected a weak but structured magnetic pulse, one that repeated every 17 minutes, the same interval as 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲's gas emissions. This was no longer a question of if the object would impact. It became a question of whether Mars was already preparing for it, as if the planet wasn't being threatened, but being activated. Something inside the crust, dormant for millennia, had just begun to stir. Shutterstock. With every passing hour, the idea of impact became less of a physical event and more of a temporal one. The Webb team noticed that light fluctuations from 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲 were no longer consistent with cometary spin. Instead, they followed a recursive, layered timing sequence. 7 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, pause, 13 pulses, and so on. These numbers weren't random. When graphed, they created a Fibonacci-based spiral, one often associated with organic growth, memory encoding, and even human DNA coiling. Mathematicians and cryptographers joined forces to decipher it and landed on a disturbing hypothesis. 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲 is transmitting time, not in seconds or hours, but in cycles, epochs. The object isn't just arriving, it is synchronizing. The countdown, it turns out, isn't to the impact moment. It is to resonance, a convergence of energy, orbit, and consciousness. And if this countdown ends, it might not bring an explosion, but a shift in perception, or perhaps even in the very framework of reality as we know it. In the final 72 hours before projected impact, a signal was detected. Low-frequency, infrasonic, inaudible to human ears, but unmistakable in its waveform. It wasn't coming from space. It wasn't even bouncing off Mars. It was originating from under Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. This area, long thought geologically dead, suddenly emitted a structured harmonic frequency captured independently by orbiters from ESA, CNSA, and NASA. The signal matched known natural phenomena. But when isolated and visualized as a spectrogram, it formed a spiral, a mirror of the same waveform emitted by 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲 during its closest approach to the Sun. The scientific community fell silent. What does it mean when a planet responds to an object before it even arrives? Is Olympus Mons merely echoing, or is it communicating? Has Mars been waiting for this exact moment? And more importantly, if this is Mars waking up, what happens when it finally opens its eyes? As the final hours ticked by, a curious discovery emerged from a forgotten dataset, an old thermal scan from the Mars Odyssey orbiter taken nearly 2 decades ago. It showed a faint heat signature beneath the surface of 𝗺𝗶𝘂𝘁𝗲𝘁, dismissed at the time as solar reflection noise. But when the same region was rescanned following the 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲 approach, the heat pattern had not only returned, it had grown, and now matched the shape of an ancient glyph carved into the stone walls of the D&M pyramid. The glyph, barely visible to the human eye, depicted a descending spiral colliding with a circle and what appeared to be 2 planetary spheres aligned at the moment of contact. The implications were staggering. Mars may hold a memory not just of geology, but of an encoded celestial past. What if Mars isn't just a planet? What if it is a recording device, and 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲𝘁 is the playback key? Then, something impossible occurred. High-resolution imagery from ESA's Mars Express captured movement in the dust fields south of Noctis Labyrinthus. Not wind, not rover activity, something rising. A pattern forming in the sand. 2 perfect concentric ovals expanding outward, as if carved from beneath. Over a period of 4 hours, the shapes extended and shifted until they formed an unmistakable image, an eye. Tilted exactly 23.5 degrees, Earth's axial tilt. The symbolism was overwhelming. An eye watching us, or a mirror showing us ourselves? Scientists scrambled for answers, but none came. Mars had just blinked. Not metaphorically, not poetically, physically, deliberately. Something beneath the surface was not only aware, but aware of us, of our geometry, of our orientation, and most disturbingly, of our signal. As if this entire event had been anticipated, perhaps even requested, long before our species ever existed. In one of the last readings before signal blackout, the James Webb Space Telescope performed a spectral breakdown of the molecular trail left by 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲𝘁. Among the volatile organics and carbon chains was something that sent ripples through every astrobiology lab on Earth. A repeating strand of nuclear-based sequences eerily similar to RNA. Not exact, not Earth-based, but unmistakably structured for replication. A foreign form of prebiotic information embedded in the vapor drifting across space. As scientists began mapping it out, a horrifying possibility emerged. It was not just biological, it was responsive. Portions of the strand mirrored human-designed encryption keys. Others resembled known musical intervals, as if the molecule itself was designed to interact with intelligence, to respond to interpretation. This was no passive cometary dust. It was a living code engineered not to survive space, but to transmit through it. Life not as cells, but as language. As 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗲𝘁 entered its final trajectory arc, the global astronomy network mapped one last alignment. Mars, Earth, and the Sun would briefly form a perfect straight line, with 𝗺𝗵𝘂𝘁𝗁 poised to intersect the axis at the precise moment of solar transit. But this wasn't just an orbital coincidence. The projection matched ancient megalithic alignments found on Earth, Stonehenge, 𝗵𝗂𝘂𝘁𝗂𝘁, Teotihuacan, all pointing to the same triad of celestial angles. For millennia, humans had unknowingly built monuments in preparation for this very configuration. And now the alignment was about to repeat, not as myth, but as mechanism. Mars, the red witness. Earth, the awakened observer. The Sun, the eternal source. And 𝗺𝗵. Not an object, not a rock, but a keystone falling into the lock of planetary memory. The final position is not about destruction. It is about completion. And once it aligns, something will change. Not out there, but in here. We looked at the sky and thought we saw a comet, a rogue rock, a wandering fragment from some forgotten corner of the galaxy. We named it 𝗺𝗵. We tracked its numbers. We mapped its arc. We convinced ourselves it was random. But what the James Webb Telescope revealed wasn't randomness. It was ritual. This object didn't just arrive, it performed. It aligned. It responded. And as it crossed the solar system, every planet it passed began to whisper back. Signals, pulses, alignments, codes. Mars didn't just react, it remembered. As if this wasn't its first encounter. As if this moment had been scripted into the bones of the planets, the dust of the craters, the pulse of gravity itself. And now, with one final maneuver, 𝗺𝗵 has taken position, not to destroy, but to complete something, a pattern, a countdown, a convergence. Mars may be the stage, but Earth, we are the audience. And we were never meant to be passive observers. We were always part of the design. Every telescope we built, every signal we sent, every theory we mocked, all of it was heard. The final impact may not be physical. It may not leave a crater, but it has already begun to reshape what we thought we knew about Mars, about life, about ourselves. Because in the end, 𝗺𝗵 didn't come from Mars. It came for our attention. And now that it has it, we have to ask, what happens next? Subscribe, because this story is far from over. Turn on notifications, because what comes next won't be televised. Share this video with someone who still thinks we're alone. And tell us in the comments. Do you think 𝗺𝗵 was an accident or an invitation? Because maybe, just maybe, Mars isn't about to be impacted. Maybe we are the ones being struck by the truth. I'd love to hear what you think about this, so drop a comment below. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please share this video and subscribe to help the channel grow. Every bit of support counts.